about what are the biological differences between men and women, other than the obvious?
Well, something nice and easy. So, as just a little introduction, so I was very delighted when Daddy asked me to be on this panel, but also quite scared as well, because it's such a charged and loaded topic. It's a big topic. But you know, I've been on quite a journey with this myself over the last few years, doing men's work and then working as a coach. And I guess one of the things, so it's all very well to live the journey, but it's a whole nother matter to analyse, clarify, and then discuss these particular concepts with a group of people like this in a panel. So there's just a few things that I wanted to clarify just before I start launching into biological approaches to the differences between men and women. And the first thing is that when I talk about the masculine, that's not synonymous with male. And when I talk about feminine, that's not synonymous with female. So for me, each person contains a masculine and feminine energy. So that's the first thing to say. Second thing to say is that we're all quite lucky to be able to have this conversation together like this, and I think it would be quite surprising if our grandparents and maybe some of our parents were sitting here and having these conversations. So I feel quite lucky to be at a time where we can actually talk about this. And just the other thing to say is that I think that our grandparents and maybe even our parents lived in a time, in a society where they weren't blessed to be living in such a big sphere of nuance. So their thinking was much more black and white about particular topics. And so we have the benefit of much more knowledge. So that brings me to the subject of sex and gender. And so the reason why I talk about our grandparents and our parents is that they probably would have had a much more black and white thinking about what differentiates men from women. And probably it was all about our differences in sex. And the biological approach to sex effectively says that you're born a certain sex, and that doesn't change, and it's determined by your chromosomal content, either XX or XY, or in some other minority of cases, a different combination of chromosomes. And then you have, as a man, particular reproductive organs, and as a woman, particular reproductive organs. And then the chromosomes and the reproductive organs create a whole host of hormones in your body that affect behaviour, that affect identity, that have an effect on all of these aspects in your daily life. But the reason why I mentioned nuance is that this is probably an important factor, but not the only factor that is important in this discussion. And I'll come back to this in a minute.